You feel it before you see it. A slip of the knife, a fall on gravel, skin opening in a thin red line. Within seconds, your body starts closing the wound. Within an hour, you're at a sink, running it underwater, reaching for antiseptic. Within a day, if it's deep enough, you're in a clinic, getting stitched shut with sterile thread. This process feels obvious, automatic, modern. Here's the disruption. It isn't modern at all. In 1957, in a cave in northern Iraq called Shanidar, archaeologists uncovered the skeleton of a Neanderthal man who lived roughly 45,000 years ago. Researchers labeled him Shanidar 1. He was blind in one eye. His right arm had been amputated below the elbow. His skull showed a healed fracture. And here's the part that stopped researchers cold. The bone had remodeled, it had healed, which meant he didn't die from these injuries. He lived with them for years, in a Paleolithic world with no antibiotics, no anesthesia, no surgical tools as we'd define them. A man that disabled in that environment should not have survived. He did. This single skeleton forces a question that reframes everything you think you know about ancient life. If Paleolithic humans had no medicine in the way you understand it, how did anyone survive a wound at all? The answer isn't luck, it's technique. Techniques so old, so consistently reinvented across unrelated cultures that researchers now believe wound care may be one of the oldest continuous sciences humans have ever practiced. Older than writing, older than agriculture, possibly older than language itself. To understand how, you have to go back further than Shanidar to a discovery made in 2022 in a limestone cave on the island of Borneo that rewrote the known timeline of surgery by 24,000 years. In September 2022, a team led by archaeologist Tim Maloney from Griffith University in Australia was excavating a cave called Liang Tabo in the limestone karsts of East Kalimantan, Borneo. They found a skeleton missing part of its left leg, not missing from decay, missing from a clean, healed amputation. The bone had been cut, not crushed. The remaining stump showed clear signs of healing and regrowth, evidence the person survived for 6 to 9 years after the operation. Radiocarbon dating placed the surgery at roughly 31,000 years old. Before this find, the oldest known evidence of amputation surgery came from a 7,000-year-old French farming site. Borneo pushed the timeline back by more than 4 times that gap, into the depths of the last ice age. Think about what that surgery required. Whoever performed it understood anatomy well enough to avoid the arteries and nerves that would have caused the patient to bleed out or die of shock within minutes. They had tools sharp enough to cut cleanly, and critically, they had a way to manage infection, because in a tropical rainforest environment, an open wound like that should have turned septic within days. But here's where it gets stranger. The individual survived years afterward, walking on uneven terrain, likely with help from their community. That means this wasn't a one-time act of desperation. It was a known procedure, backed by aftercare in a Pleistocene hunter-gatherer band that left no written records at all. So where did that knowledge come from? The clues start to appear not in bone, but in plant. And one of the clearest cases comes from a chimpanzee, not a human, in a forest in Gabon in 2022. Primatologist Alessandra Mascaro, working with the Ozuga Chimpanzee Project, filmed something that had never been documented. A chimp named Sumatra, with an open wound on his foot, chewing the leaves of a flowering plant, then pressing the paste directly onto the injury. Researchers observed this behavior repeatedly across the group, chimpanzees applying insect matter and chewed plants to their own wounds and to each other's. That detail matters more than it first appears. Self-treatment is one thing, treating another individual is something else. It implies an understanding that the wound is a shared problem, not just a personal one. That's not the whole story, though, because if a wild chimpanzee, with no tools and no fire, can identify which plants dull pain and fight infection, then the real question isn't whether early humans had this knowledge, it's how far back that knowledge goes, and just how deliberately it was passed down. The deepest evidence comes not from a wound, but from a tooth. In 2017, researchers led by Karen Hardy, an archaeologist at the University of York, analyzed dental plaque from Neanderthal remains at El Cedron Cave in Spain, dated to roughly 48,000 years ago. Trapped in the calcified plaque of one individual, a young male suffering from a dental abscess and an intestinal parasite, they found traces of poplar bark, a natural source of salicylic acid, the same compound found in modern aspirin. They also found evidence of a natural Penicillin mold, the same fungus family behind modern penicillin. This Neanderthal wasn't randomly chewing on bark. He was self-medicating with a plant-based painkiller and potentially a natural antibiotic. 44,000 years before Alexander Fleming isolated penicillin in a London laboratory in 1928, except there was a problem with treating infection alone. Pain relief and antimicrobial plants could only go so far. The deeper threat was always blood loss and contamination during the treatment itself, which is why the physical technique of closing a wound had to evolve alongside the pharmacology. Evidence for that comes from an unexpected place, ancient Egypt, and a text called the Edwin Smith Papyrus, dated to roughly 1600 BCE, but believed to copy source material centuries older. It describes 48 clinical cases of trauma, including the use of adhesive strips, raw meat applied to stop bleeding, and honey, now confirmed by modern microbiology to have genuine antibacterial properties due to its low pH and hydrogen peroxide content. Separately, archaeological and textual evidence from India, associated with the physician Sushruta around 600 BCE, describes wound closure using ant mandibles, pressing the wound shut, positioning a large ant against the seam, letting it clamp down, then removing the body and leaving the sealed jaws in place as a suture. Different continents, different centuries, no contact between these groups, yet the same core logic keeps appearing. Stop the bleeding, close the wound, fight the infection, manage the pain. It's not one culture's discovery, it's a solution the human species seems to have arrived at again and again, independently, whenever survival demanded it, which brings the story back to Shanidar 1. The one-armed, one-eyed Neanderthal who lived for years after injuries that should have killed him. He didn't survive because Ice Age medicine was primitive. He survived because it wasn't. Somebody set his bones. Somebody controlled his bleeding. Somebody fed him and protected him while he was too disabled to do it alone. Every time you reach for a bandage or let a cut sit exposed to air and time, you are running a protocol that is, in some form, tens of thousands of years old. The stitches have changed, the antiseptics have changed, but the underlying instinct that a wound is not just an injury to one body, but a problem the whole group solves together, is something you inherited, unmodified, from a species that didn't survive by being strong,